Thank you, Diane. What we're going to do is give you an overview of the infrastructure that my MAT has, how that works, and the climate we have within that. Then we've got a case study on one area, one problem, and we'll lead you through that case study and we'll evidence between us how I used the research school and you used Joe to help us to solve that problem and to move forward in school improvement. And at the end, we'll show you what the impact was of this particular example. So that's what we're going to do for you. You can see from the screen, like many of you, have lots of designations, lots of things going on, very exciting. Have a MAT. I've got 2 schools there in the MAT. I've got 2 more coming, so I'm very excited to have 4 in the MAT. But we do have all of the other designations. So that is a challenge to strategically lead. They all have their own boards. They all have their own reporting format, but we all play together in the MAT. I, as a CEO, set up a senior leadership team of all of those. And so we meet every fortnight, and we use that as a mechanism to set our priorities, long-term and short-term. Okay. From a long-term point of view, I use the logic model, the one you've just heard of from Alex, to set the school development priorities for the long term. So that's the model I use for the priorities of the schools and all of the designations. That helps us to see what we're looking for over that period of time. I then use that to report to the governing bodies of all of those and all the boards, and I report against the risks. So I don't report the activity because that's already been reported from the logic model, but I report against the risks of the outcomes. So are we on track to meet those outcomes? And if not, what we're going to do about it. I also have, every fortnight we meet and we have what I call lightning rounds. And in those lightning rounds, we would discuss the issues or problems that the schools, the heads of the designations have. And that's very similar to the school improvement activity that many of you are doing at the moment, the current live problems. I then look at what we've already got in place, and I look to see if we already have a change team that's already assigned to a particular area of the school development plan. I look to see if that could land in with one of our teams already, or whether we need to create another change team, whether it needs to land at the moment, or actually needs to forward to something else. I use that for school improvement, for grant funding, for pupil premium, and for PE. That gives the structure to challenge and to change things, and to have behind that the research school to support me. If I give one example, only a couple of weeks ago, we were all sitting around, and it's that point in the year when you're looking at your grant funding. So you're looking at your pupil premium, you're looking at your PE, and we're looking back to see where are we positioned. And at that point, you have got people around the table that might have finance. And so they've got one view. Business manager might have another review, reminding you of your KPIs or reminding you of your grant funding. Your principals are thinking, oh, I want this, the latest thing I want to buy or do. And at that point, Joe would say to me, can we just look at what was the logic model? What was your expected outcomes? And these are the best bets. And that is a very powerful tool when you're sitting, particularly as a CEO, or when I go into schools as an NLE. It's quite powerful to have that, to say, actually, you've got all of those people with all the different views, but can we have a look at these best bets and see if at this moment in time, this actually sits and needs to land? Because sometimes it doesn't need to land, sometimes it needs to forward to something else, or actually can align with what we're already doing and already have a change team ready to do. As a result of that, I feel that my senior management team is very strategic and draws on many, many areas, including the research. From Jo's point of view, her view of that.
Okay, so my role is very similar to the role I think you're going to take when you go into a support school. So I'm not a head teacher of one of our maths schools. So my role is to ask the questions to say, can I help you narrow down to the specific problem? Can I point you in the direction of the best evidence? And can we think about a plan that will take us there in the most effective way? Which is your challenge over the 3 days, I think. So Amanda and I are going to talk through her role as an NLE, leading a school, and how I support the team to do that. I call our moment a Damascene moment, which makes me St. Paul, no inflated ego here, St. Paul of Tarsus, because I've been a teacher for a very, very long time. This is my 30th year in the profession. And as a teacher, I've been asked to do things on many different occasions which had no basis in the evidence whatsoever. You know, I've been set a quiz and asked whether I looked up to the right or to the left, and apparently that told somebody whether I was left-brained or right-brained. I've planned worksheets in 3 different ways for kinesthetic learners, for visual learners, and for auditory learners on the basis of very little. Now, a lot of you, certainly on my table, talked about financial restrictions. I think we have a moral imperative when we have very little money and some real needs in children in front of us to spend our money on the best bets. And that's my job, to point the best bets out, not the silver bullets, to have honest conversations with our head teachers and our MAT, to say, this is what the evidence suggests would be the best bet. You've got very little money, let's spend it on the thing that's most likely to work. And really, those are the kind of conversations that you should be framing. Helping schools identify a problem more precisely and then go to the evidence to find the best bets for the solution for that problem. So in your packs, you will need, this is Amanda and I's logic model, it's towards the back. And then I know on your table, Alex has created a kind of reflection sheet that you might just want to make notes on as Amanda and I talk through the logic model. So if I start by giving you a little bit of context of the school, so I want to talk to you about the problem that we are looking at, and Amanda will talk to you about how to fill your logic model in. So I'm up on the top box. This is our logic model. It says at the top, reading Key Stage 1 and 2. In the school that we were working with, we identified the problem as being twofold. There was a problem around teacher knowledge and consistency of teacher practice in reading. For example, that Scarborough reading rope that you looked at earlier, most of the teachers in that school had no idea what that was. So they could talk to us to say, children are poor readers. They might even be able to narrow that down to say, our boys are poor readers, but they couldn't effectively diagnose which aspect of reading they were poor in, and therefore they couldn't do responsive teaching to meet that, or indeed pick the right intervention. So we had an issue around teacher knowledge and consistency of teacher practice. That was exemplified, for example, in reception in Key Stage 1. You know, one person had been trained in read, write, ink at a previous school, so they're doing a bit of read, write, ink, and then year 1, well, I just do letters and sounds. So there was no consistency in the teaching of phonics. So we knew that was the problem with the teachers. Our problem with the children, we used, I'm going to waft these at you, we used some audit tools that come with the Key Stage 1 and 2 literacy guidance. So we audited practice. We had a look at what the pupils were doing, and we could see that they had some deficits in vocabulary. We could see that they did not read for pleasure at all. So any reading just took place under the direction of the teacher. So we knew that those were our very specific problems. We weren't talking about population groups. We were talking about the problems that we could see in the teacher knowledge and practice and how that was exemplified in student outcomes. So that's our context.
From an NLE point of view, looking at the evidence to begin with highlighted reading as an issue. At that point, you use all of your skills to go around and have a look and try and identify where the issues are, what are the key indicators. And as Joe's referenced, you would potentially use your usual questioning of your staff, talking to your leaders, using the audits. And as a process of that, I discovered that really the leaders were unclear, which is no surprise. They were unclear exactly what was contributing to the underattainment. They were unclear what they actually wanted about the teaching, what should it look like. And they really didn't have a vision of how that could happen, in what way, and how they could then ensure that their school could lead forward. This is a sponsor school that had joined our trust. It's about a year ago, and therefore they joined our group and our senior leadership team, and we were able to unpick what those issues were, and Joe was able to signpost to the relevant audits to unpick the actual issues that were at the bottom of the problem of reading.
Okay, so we've got agreed language, that agreed language that Alex was talking about we're all clear what our problem is. We know what our problem is about teachers, we know what our problem is about pupils. This is what we would like to see at the end. So we went right to the last box next, box number 2 there, it's labelled, but it's the last one. What will success look like? But then we're on this box. We had got agreement about the problem, but we needed to make sure that all of the teachers knew this is the solution we're suggesting for the problem. Then we call that the intervention description. So on here you can see that we identified 4 things, 4 non-negotiables. These are the things we must see in your practice to fix these problems. And we took that from the evidence. We went to the EYFS, preparing for early literacy, we used the Key Stage 1 guidance and the Key Stage 2 guidance. And the 4 things we said we need to develop oral language. And you can see there that was the rehearsal of written work, we wanted the oral rehearsal of written work, we wanted modelling, explicit modelling by the teacher when doing reading comprehension, when doing writing. We wanted them to identify Tier 2 vocabulary and explicitly teach it based on the text choices for the curriculum. That was the first non-negotiable, you will do these things. The second was that we wanted adults to read aloud to children every day, from fiction and non-fiction. And the third was that we wanted them to explicitly use and teach the 6 comprehension strategies that you will see in the Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 guidance. From year 1 right through to year 6, we're going to use those language. Children will know whether they are predicting, whether they are inferring, whether they are summarising, and we use the teaching sequence from the Key Stage 2 guidance for that. So we're very clear on what classroom teaching would look like in order to solve our problem. We also went, the 4th element was the children who'd already fallen behind significantly across the school. It was quite typical. There were a lot of interventions going on. Most of them had been going on for a very long time. Some of the staff teaching the interventions had not been trained in the intervention method that they were using. Somebody had told them about it who did it the year before. So all of that was stopped, and we went for the Nuffield Early Language Intervention because it's evidence-based, it's one of the promising projects, and we felt, okay, this is a best bet. Toe by toe might work, we don't know. It hasn't been robustly tested, but Nellie has. So that was our 4th ingredient. So you can see here we identified where practice was not as close to the research-informed evidence as we wanted, and we clearly set out the activities that the teachers would do to move their practice closer to evidence-informed.
From my point of view, a tip that I would give you is if you are using a logic model, you've got to do a little tip where you've got to fold it. If you don't do that, your leaders will jump to the activity. So I fold mine. This says of the teacher in me. So the first box would be your problem, and the second box would be your outcome. And then you can start to unpick with the evidence, and as the results of your audits, then you can unfold. And you can allow them to fill in the activities at this point. From your aspect, if you are looking at this, that context, that problem is your context box that you could use on your school improvement work. And the activities that Joe's outlining are ones that could actually be recommendations in the activities for the leadership. So it gives you an idea of how that could work when you go into a school and you do school improvement. From our point of view, when we had that all outlined, we then had another problem that actually the leaders underestimated how long that would need to change something. As you would expect, everything needs to happen at pace and quick. They wanted it to happen like yesterday. So much going on, couldn't see that we'd identified one area. It's what I call the bird's nest scenario. Alex referred to it earlier, where there's so much going on that they can't hone in on the one thing that can have the biggest impact. And for us, reading it was having such an effect on all of the other curriculum areas, they couldn't see that. So even when you get to the point of outlining the activities, often leaders are drawn back. Currently, the big thing is, Ofsted's coming and I need to change my whole curriculum. It's like, well, let's just pull back a bit from that because you've got a problem with reading first. That can be the golden thread going forward to your curriculum. And there's a need to actually pause and say, look, what are we wanting to change? This is the time span we're going to do it. Often that is the reporting that people get worried about. So I find reporters saying, look, we will report this to our governance, to our local governing bodies, we will report it on risks. This is what we're going to do, and this is where we're at. This is the risk if we don't achieve it, and that actually settles down your leaders quite quickly, and they also know that you're in the exploring stage, so you're exploring what the solutions to the problem could be. And that's quite important for them to realise that instead of jumping to delivery, that they're exploring what it needs to look like. And when that's clear, then that's a solid base for the next step. At this point, when I'm looking at that, again, I would go to Jo and say, hang on a minute, this is where we're positioned. What's your advice for us to now deliver and to plan for that delivery going forward?
Okay, so we're now on this box, the implementation activities. And again, my role is to be honest about how long this will take and what needs to be put in place for it to be successful. So we know that changing teacher behaviour is really hard. And if I say to Amanda, are we going to nail reading comprehension, just give me 30 minutes at the end of the training day on the 3rd of September, I'd be lying. So we know it takes persistent, prolonged professional development. And we've got the national CPD standards. So it's very important that when I'm working with a school and with school leaders, I say to them, we need to use the national CPD standards because that's research about how to change teacher behaviour. So let's use it. So you can see on there, one of the things we did, we had 3 sessions, 3 3-hour sessions of what we would call external input. So in our case, Amanda can ask me as the research lead to come and do that. But you could point your schools, your support schools, to other evidence-informed providers who could come in and give them some external expertise around effective reading. So we had 3 3-hour sessions spaced across the year with gap tasks for the staff in that school, where we repeatedly went back over the evidence and explored those best bets. The next thing I needed is, again, a bit of a northern expression, but I needed some head peckers. I need to keep that message between the CPD. I need an implementation team in school, and it can't just be the head. I needed a change team, the distribution of the responsibilities, so that we had coaching sessions built in, that it was put regularly into phase group meetings, just that head pecking of, let's talk about how we've modelled this week. Who's modelled something really well? How have the children responded to the reading aloud? How are we identifying our Tier 2 words? Are we seeing any impact on the children's writing of the Tier 2 words? The other thing that we did was we knew that particularly in a primary school, particularly when we're looking around reading, and particularly when some of the issues are in the early years, we had to work with our support staff. We couldn't leave their knowledge and practice behind. So we went to another guidance report, we went to the deployment of TA report, we used that to do some training with our paraprofessionals, we explained to the school how important that was, and then obviously, because we'd invested in the Nuffield Early Language Intervention, we need the staff delivering that programme to be trained by Nuffield. I can't do that because I'm not trained in the Nuffield Early Language, I didn't write it. So some resources had to be put aside for that. So again, the activities have a realistic time span and a realistic amount of effort that it's going to take to change teacher behaviour. I can't spin that one. I've got to be honest with them.
From my point of view, I knew at that point, my sense check was that staff needed to have new knowledge. So new things needed to happen. They needed new practice. Pupils needed better outcomes, and things needed to be put in place that were workable. And all of those were my triggers as I'm having the discussions about next steps, about the provision, about what we would be doing on the ground. The process on the ground needed to be usable and user-friendly, and that was my check all the way through. Just to sense check that what we were doing was going to have the outcomes on the outcome box on the logic model. As I was doing that, I would sense check with Jo to think, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm seeing, this is how it could land live. What do we need to make sure that we're building in on the ground? And that's a discussion I'd have with Jo about the process and the impact.
It's also really important that I give our leaders tools to know whether it's working or not. Because ultimately, the point of doing it is we want to change things for the children. But I've said changing teacher behaviour is hard. And what I don't want them to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, look, phonics results haven't gone up and we've been doing this for a month. I've got to have some way of building in from the start processes that allow the leadership in the school to see if there are green shoots that suggest this will have an impact on children at a later point. So that process there that Amanda went through is really the stages. As the person providing the CPD, it's my job to get that new knowledge into the head of the teachers. If I do that badly, if I don't teach them well the new knowledge around the Scarborough Reading Rope, then how can they do something different? So the first thing we built in is, has staff knowledge improved? Can we see evidence? When we put it in our implementation plan, how are we going to capture new staff knowledge? And then if they know something new, I want to see if they're going to do something different. Because if their practice doesn't change, why would outcomes for the children change? So the second layer of collecting data, and I use that in its broader sense, not in a number sense, is how much fidelity to that list at the beginning of the things I said were non-negotiable is going on. Are all staff reading every day? Are they using high-quality text? And if those two things are in place, then we could start seeing changes for children. If I imagine I'm going to see changes for children without new staff knowledge and without new staff practices, I'm fooling myself. So our monitoring needs to be of staff knowledge and staff practice and then children's outcomes. And we need to also build that business in about process. Because as Amanda said, if by doing this, I extend their planning to 11 o'clock at every night, that's not going to be sustainable. So we have to see how the stakeholders, the children, the teachers respond to that. And also, this gives a head teacher some tools to take back to their governing body. Things haven't changed for children yet, but we know that the staff know new things. We can see that the majority of the staff are now doing things in a different way. And this is how we're supporting the staff who are struggling to shift those new knowledges into new practices. We've got these coaching elements in. So it gives them tools to be able to feel confident that what we're doing is working, or indeed if it's not working, to stop and do something different because maybe my training hasn't been good enough.
It helps you be very explicit on what you are looking at when you're monitoring. You're very explicit on what you're expecting, and actually that sends a comfort around the teams in which you work in, that I'm not going to come in and pick you up on this, this and this. This is exactly the activities we've agreed. This is what we expect, and therefore that is what we're coming in to monitor you against. And that is quite a liberating feeling when you go into schools.
I'll quickly talk through this one because I've been given the 1 minute signal. So the evidential, you can get hold of the guidance reports, you can get hold of the audit tools, all of those are on the EF website. You don't need to have a research lead in your school because there are research schools. So I've put up there some of the wider reading that I did to try and create practical activities for the staff. You can go to a research school, that's what we're here for. We can do that hard work for you. Or you can direct your support school to a research school and say, if you'd like to know more about reading comprehension, if you'd like some suggested reading, then come to us. Amanda's just going to talk a bit about the impact.
Yes, I mean, this is the bit that you need to know at this point. So you're into the programme, and we went back to do an external review, brought somebody in to do an external review to see where we're at. When I went a year beforehand and I was doing my learning walks or observations, etc., I had to chase staff around the room. It's not uncommon when I come in and enter a room, but there we go. Chase them around to have a conversation about learning. They were avoiding me. They didn't, not looking at you. Significant change within a year. You're going and people were chasing me down, wanting to show me and others what was going on in the classroom. They were very confident in talking about the learning journey that they were planning for and what was happening next. Huge cultural shift. The leaders themselves were confident in talking to others about what they'd planned, what the expectation was, and what the actual impact on the ground with the staff and with the pupils was at that particular moment in time. There was no evidence of increase on workload, which had a sense check on all the way through. And really you can see right at the bottom that predicted data is looking significantly better already. And that is another element. If you look at the whole lot, we had sort of the teacher side of things, the pupil side of things, and the confidence and the culture within a year, feeling quite proud. And the teacher, the principal, one of the feedback was, this feels like a normal school. I've never seen someone look so pleased to be called a normal school. But if you think of the journey of school improvement, a school that has been in a place where it is not ready and has had to be sponsored, it potentially has had chaos, and to actually see some light at the end of the tunnel, to have green shoots, it gives a model for implementation on all of the other areas. So now I've got a team that's used to working that way and can use that model to address their other problems, which I think that's one of the final points I'd say. When you go in and do school improvement, this is a model that you can coach and mentor people to actually have an implementation on other areas. And I think that would be a powerful tool to leave them with the scaffolding to do that. So that's the final part. Thank you.
Massive thank you. Amanda, can we thank...